Silverton, Montana, 4:17 p.m. The afternoon sun bled across the valley, turning the dust into gold. The trading post sat at the edge of town, its faded sign creaking above the door like it had one last breath left in it. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. Locals drifted in and out, faces burned from the sun, pockets light from another hard week. But no one noticed the old woman sitting on the bench near the gas pumps. She wore a long grey coat, too big for her frame, and boots that had seen 3 decades of winters. A worn leather bag sat between her knees, and her trembling hands clutched it like something sacred. Everyone passed her, truckers, ranchers, teenagers on dirt bikes, without a second look. She wasn't loud enough to matter, not rich enough to be seen. That is, until a low rumble rolled up the road, the kind that made the glass tremble in its frame. A Harley diner, matte black and scarred with road dust, pulled in. Its rider cut the engine, heavy boots hitting the pavement. He lifted his helmet, and a sharp-eyed stranger stared out. Part outlaw, part angel. The man was in his 30s, lean and scarred, his beard trimmed close, his eyes a hard shade of mercy. His kuta read, "Hellsangels," Bitterroot chapter across the back, the red and white patch gleaming against black leather. He removed his gloves, glancing at the old woman. Everyone else had gone back to their business, pretending not to see. He didn't. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but kind, "you all right there?" She blinked up at him, her voice brittle like dried leaves. I think I was supposed to meet someone, but they didn't come." Her eyes flicked toward the mountains beyond the highway. "My driver said he'd wait, but he's gone." The biker frowned. "You got a phone?" She shook her head. "Never cared for those things. Always ringing when you don't want them to." He looked around. No family, no ride, just her and that worn bag. Something in her face, the same hollow fatigue he'd seen in veterans and runaways, made him take a breath he didn't owe anyone. "All right," he said softly. "Let's figure this out." Inside the trading post, the air was thick with pine oil and cheap coffee. The biker guided the old woman gently to a chair near the counter. A few locals watched, whispering under their breath. "Old hag's lost again," one muttered. "Probably drunk." The biker's head snapped toward them, his voice sharp as a knife. "Show some damn respect." Silence fell. He turned back to her. "Name's Ryder," he said, kneeling so they were eye level. "What's yours?" She smiled faintly. "Martha," she said. "Martha Whitmore." The name made the store clerk look up quick, a flicker of recognition, then a nervous swallow. Ryder caught it. "You know her?" he asked. The clerk hesitated. "Everyone in this valley knows the Whitmore Ranch. Used to be the biggest spread north of here." Ryder looked back at Martha. Her eyes were cloudy, distant. "You own that ranch?" She blinked slowly. "Owned? Maybe. My husband built it. But things get away from you when you get old, son." Ryder stood, jaw tightening. "Not if I can help it." Outside, the sun dipped low. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from engines. 2 bikes turned off the highway, chrome flashing like signal mirrors. The rest of the Bitterroot chapter had arrived. A small pack of riders, moving with precision born of survival. The first off was Tank, broad as a barn door, tattoos curling down his neck. The second, Crow, thin, sharp, and silent as dusk. Ryder met them halfway. "Got a situation," he said. "Old lady says she's Martha Whitmore." Tank frowned. "The ranch widow? Thought she was dead." "So did everyone," Ryder said. "She's not." Crow glanced toward the trading post window where Martha sat sipping water, hands trembling. "What's the play?" Ryder lit a cigarette, thinking. "She says she's from the Whitmore Ranch up in Silver Canyon." Tank cursed low. "That's a rough ride." Narrow passes, no guardrails, and half the road's washed out. Ryder nodded. Yes, she's not making it alone. I'll take her home, Crow smirked. And what, leave her with ghosts? Ryder flicked ash into the dirt. Better ghosts than vultures. He turned, sliding his helmet back on. Keep an eye on her bag. Feels like more than groceries in there. By the time Ryder helped Martha onto the bike, the wind had turned sharp. She clung to him with surprising strength as they rolled out of town, the Harley's engine growling like a heartbeat beneath them. The road wound through pine forests and up into the narrow ridges that framed the valley. You ride often? She asked over the roar of the wind. Ryder smiled under his breath. Every day, ma'am. It's cheaper than therapy. She laughed softly, a fragile sound swallowed by the wind. The further they climbed, the more the land changed. Fences replaced by cliffs, pastures giving way to wild rock and river cut. Martha pointed ahead. That bridge up there. My Thomas built it with his own hands. Ryder slowed. The bridge was old timber, warped but standing. As they crossed, he glanced down, a drop steep enough to swallow both bike and rider. On the far side, an iron gate stood open, its paint long gone, but a rusted W still clear in the center. Home? Martha whispered. At least, what's left of it. Ryder didn't know it yet, but the road behind that gate would change everything. The Whitmore Ranch spread out like a memory carved into the valley floor. Even in decay, it was magnificent. Weathered barns, fences leaning like tired sentries, the main house standing proud against the horizon. Ryder cut the engine at the front gate, the sudden silence almost sacred. You sure this is it? He asked. Martha nodded slowly. Every fence post, every stone, my Thomas touched them. Her voice carried both pride and grief. The house looked empty, windows dark, ivy creeping up the walls like veins. Ryder swung off the bike, scanning the property with instinct born from years of bad roads and worse men. Stay here, he said. He pushed open the front door. It groaned like a secret being forced to speak. Dust motes danced in sunlight, slicing through the cracked shutters. The air smelled of cedar and age. Family portraits lined the walls, men in ranch coats, women in lace dresses. But something else caught his eye. A red seal on an envelope sitting on the table. It read, "Eviction Notice, Foreclosure Pending." Ryder stood staring at the letter until Martha's voice drifted from the doorway. They said I'd forgotten to sign something, she murmured. Papers. Always papers. She walked to the table, fingers brushing the envelope. That land out there was supposed to keep feeding people long after I'm gone. Ryder folded the notice quietly and slid it into his pocket. Who sent it? He asked. Some company, she said vaguely. Ironwood Holdings. They said my grandson sold the rights. Her brow furrowed. But I never had a grandson, Ryder frowned. Ironwood. He'd heard the name. A shell corporation that flipped ranches for mineral contracts, backed by developers out of Nevada. He looked around the room again, noticing footprints in the dust, recent, large, deliberate. You've had visitors, Martha nodded faintly. They come sometimes, say they're here to help, but I don't trust smiles that show too many teeth. Ryder's jaw tightened. He'd seen this story before, greed dressed as business. Then let's find out what they really want, he said. He stepped back onto the porch, pulling out his phone. Crow Tank, grab the boys. We've got company circling. An hour later, the roar of multiple engines filled the canyon. The Bitterroot chapter rode in tight formation, dust rising behind them like smoke from a coming storm. They parked along the fence line, scanning the open land. Crow dismounted first. Hell of a view, he muttered. Shame it's being stolen. Ryder handed him the eviction notice. Ironwood Holdings. Tank whistled low. Those bastards again. Didn't they try to buy up half of St. Luke's territory last year? Same outfit, Ryder said. And if they're sniffing around here, they already think the old lady's gone. Wolf, the chapter's president, arrived last, a man with a grey beard and eyes that had seen too much. He read the letter, jaw hardening. So they forged a sale under her name. Seen it before, get her to sign a survey consent, flip it into ownership. Martha stood in the doorway, clutching her bag. Why would they want this old place? Wolf turned to her gently. Ma'am, there's oil under your pasture. A lot of it. The truth hit like a hammer. Ryder looked at the land, then back at her. You're sitting on a fortune, and they want you gone. That night, the clubhouse lights burned late. The hellsangels had taken over the ranch house kitchen. Maps spread across the table, whiskey glasses untouched. Wolf traced a finger along a satellite image. Ironwood staging from down the ridge. Couple trailers, 2 trucks, security posted. Not government. Hired muscle. Crow cracked his knuckles. Mercs? Worse, Ryder said. Corporate cowboys who think old women are easy prey. Martha sat quietly at the end of the table, eyes glinting in the firelight. Thomas used to say people don't change, only the reasons they steal do. She reached into her leather bag and pulled out a folder, edges frayed with age. I kept every deed, every receipt, every tax stamp since 1953. They can't take what's still written in my name. Wolf smiled faintly. Ma'am, you just handed us a loaded gun. Ryder looked at her with new respect. You knew they'd come, didn't you? She met his gaze, steady now. I've been waiting. I just didn't expect angels in leather to show up first. The men chuckled low. But the laughter died fast when headlights swept across the window. Someone else had found them. The first shot shattered the front porch lantern. Ryder hit the floor, dragging Martha down with him as glass rained from the ceiling. Everyone down, Wolf roared. The sound of engines outside, not Harleys, trucks. Ryder crawled to the window and peeked out. 3 black SUVs, no plates. Men in tactical vests moving through the dark with military precision. Crow tossed him a rifle. Ironwood doesn't mess around. Ryder chambered around, eyes cold. Neither do we. He turned to Martha, her face calm despite the chaos. Stay in the pantry. Don't move till I say. She touched his sleeve. Don't let them burn what my husband built. Ryder nodded once, then sprinted to the doorway. Outside, the air stank of oil and gunpowder. Wolf shouted orders. Bikes revved, lights flared, the night alive with defiance. The first SUV burst into flames as Crow's Molotov hit its hood. Tank roared past, dragging a chain that sparked against gravel like lightning. Ryder stepped into the open, gun steady, voice fierce. You wanted her land? You'll have to take it from her angels. Gunfire echoed across the valley, sharp and relentless. The hellsangels moved like ghosts between the shadows. A choreography of survival honed by years of outlaw roads. Ryder ducked behind a stone trough, returning fire toward the SUVs. One of Ironwood's hired men fell, clutching his leg. Pull back! Someone shouted, but Ryder wasn't backing down. The night burned bright with headlight halos and muzzle flashes. Tank, swinging a heavy chain, shattered a side mirror and yanked one gunman from the vehicle. Crow's bike tore past, laying a wall of dust to obscure their position. Inside the ranch house, Martha knelt in the dark pantry, whispering an old prayer. The sound of violence outside mingled with her heartbeat, steady, unyielding. Ryder slid beside the porch, breath hard, blood running down his forearm. "Wolf!" he yelled. "We need to drive them off the ridge before they regroup." Wolf's voice carried back from behind the barn. "Then light it up, son." A second later, a flare shot skyward, red as vengeance, painting the battlefield in firelight. Against that blood-colored sky, the angels looked like avenging spirits of the land itself. The gunfire slowed, replaced by the low hum of retreating engines. Ironwood's men fled down the ridge, their silhouettes swallowed by dust and distance. The ranch fell silent except for the hiss of burning rubber. Ryder lowered his weapon, chest heaving. Crow limped over, clutching his side.
"They'll be back," he said between breaths.
People like that don't lose quietly. Wolf nodded grimly. "We'll be ready next time." He turned to Ryder. "Take the old lady into town tomorrow. Let her rest." But Martha had already stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a blanket Tankard thrown over her shoulders. Her eyes, sharp again, surveyed the wreckage. "They'll come again," she said softly, echoing Crow. "And next time they'll come to take what paper says is theirs." She looked at Ryder. "Do you trust me, son?" He hesitated. "With my life," she smiled faintly. "Then I'll trust you with mine." From inside her bag, she drew a folded document sealed with wax, older than any legal paper Ryder had seen. If they think they own this land, it's time someone reminded them what ownership really means. The next morning, the sun rose over scorched earth and bullet holes. Ryder sat at the kitchen table with Martha's document spread open between coffee mugs and shell casings. The parchment bore faded ink, ornate lettering, and a signature that made him whistle low: President Eisenhower, 1954. It was a land grant, authentic, notarized, naming Thomas and Martha Whitmore as perpetual custodians of the property for agricultural preservation. Wolf leaned in. "That's not just ownership," he said. "That's federal recognition," Ryder nodded. "It predates any private claim. Ironwood can't touch it without violating national preservation law." Martha sipped her tea calmly. "Thomas always believed the land didn't belong to us. We belong to it." Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the fields stretched golden under the light. "If greed poisons it, then it dies with us." Ryder's phone buzzed, a message from Crow's contact at the courthouse. "Ironwood filing injunction today. They're coming with lawyers this time." Ryder smiled grimly. "Then we'll fight with truth." He folded the parchment gently. "Ma'am, how do you feel about making a little noise in town?" Martha grinned. "It's been a while since anyone tried to silence me." By afternoon, the town of Silverton stood still as the rumble of engines rolled down Main Street. The hellsangels, Bitterroot chapter, rode in formation, not for intimidation, but as escort. At the center, in the sidecar of Ryder's Harley, sat Martha Whitmore, upright, composed, silver hair gleaming like a crown in the sunlight. Locals peeked out from storefronts and windows as the convoy pulled up in front of the courthouse. Ironwood's lawyers were already there, slick suits, polished boots, confidence thick as oil. The lead attorney sneered. "What's this circus?" Ryder stepped forward, sliding off his sunglasses. "Justice with horsepower," the man chuckled. "You don't scare us, biker." "Good," Ryder said evenly. "Then you'll stand real calm when she takes back what's hers." Martha walked past him, slow but steady, clutching her documents. Her voice carried in the hush. "You stole from my husband's grave, from our hands, from our history. But you forgot one thing. Paper burns. Truth doesn't," the crowd murmured. The judge, an old rancher's son himself, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have proof?" She placed the grant on his desk with a firmness that silenced everyone. "I have the ground beneath your boots, sir." The courtroom was full before the sun dipped low. Martha sat straight-backed, her patched coat draped like armor. Ryder stood behind her with Wolf and the crew, their presence an unspoken promise, no intimidation, no surrender. Ironwood's attorneys talked fast, waving charts and contracts, all jargon and loopholes. But when Martha spoke, the room leaned in. "My husband built that land before most of you were born. He fed half this town when the drought came, gave lumber for the church roof when no one else could afford it." Her hand trembled slightly, but her words didn't. "You think progress means stealing from graves. I call it greed dressed as law." The judge studied her a long moment, then turned to the documents. "These are authentic," he said finally. "The land remains under federal protection." "Case dismissed." A murmur turned to applause. Ironwood's men filed out in silence, their empire undone by an old woman they'd called senile. Outside, as the angels revved their bikes, Martha turned to Ryder. "You see, son," she said softly, "people think age weakens you. Truth is, it just strips away everything that isn't real." Ryder smiled. "Then let's ride with what's real." That evening, the sun fell slow behind the mountains, painting the Whitmore fields gold. The town buzzed with what had happened, how the hellsangels defended an old woman when the law looked away. Martha sat on her porch wrapped in a shawl, her tea steaming in the cool air. Ryder stood nearby, polishing his Harley in silence. "You didn't have to stay," she said gently. "Wasn't about have to," he replied. "Some things you just don't ride past." She smiled, the lines on her face deepening like road maps of a well-lived life. "Thomas always said angels were warriors in disguise." Ryder chuckled softly. "Guess he wasn't wrong." A hawk circled overhead, casting its shadow across the field. Martha's gaze followed it. "Freedom," she whispered. "That's what land means." Ryder looked out across the valley. "And that's what loyalty means, too." Days passed. Reporters came and went, but Martha refused interviews. "Truth doesn't need headlines," she told Ryder. "It needs roots." Together they walked the fence lines, repairing posts, her frail hands steady despite age. Wolf stopped by one morning, dropping off a deed packet. "You'll want to sign these, Ryder," he said. Ryder frowned.
"What's this?"
"A transfer of guardianship," Wolf replied. "Martha's choice." Ryder turned to her. She stood tall beside the porch rail, sunlight on her silver hair. "You kept your promise," she said. "Now it's your turn. Keep this land alive. Protect what's worth protecting." Ryder swallowed hard. "You don't have to give me anything." Martha smiled softly. "I'm not giving. I'm trusting." He nodded, voice low. "Then I'll make sure the Whitmore name never dies." For the first time, she called him son. That word meant more than any fortune. Winter came fast that year. Snow brushed the barns white, and the cattle huddled close in the pastures. Martha's health began to fade, quiet and dignified. She spent her last weeks near the window overlooking the land she'd fought for. Ryder sat with her most nights, reading aloud from Thomas's old journal. Stories of building fences, planting seed, and surviving droughts. "You think I'll see him again?" she asked one evening, voice a whisper. "If there's a road after this one," Ryder said, "he'll be waiting at the end of it." She smiled faintly. "Then don't you dare stop riding." When she passed, she did so holding that same leather bag, peace etched into her face. The angels gathered at dawn, their engines idle in tribute. The sound rolled across the valley like a heartbeat, a farewell only riders could give. Spring returned, and with it, new life on the Whitmore land. The meadows bloomed, the fences stood straight again, and Ryder kept his word. He converted the old barn into a community workshop, a place for veterans, drifters, and lost kids to rebuild bikes and maybe themselves. Over the doorway hung a metal sign, Whitmore Redemption Garage. Grow painted it blood red, saying, "Seems fitting." On opening day, a group of townsfolk arrived, men and women once skeptical, now curious. Ryder greeted them not as an outlaw, but as a neighbor. "This place," he told them, "ain't about patch or pride. It's about giving people a place to start again." Wolf nodded from the corner. The engines roared once, not in rebellion, but remembrance. The sound filled the hills like a promise, Martha's legacy living on in chrome and heart. Years later, a young rider pulled into Silverton on a borrowed bike, broke and hungry. He stopped at the old trading post, now rebuilt as a diner, with the same creaking sign. On the bench out front sat Ryder, older, grey at the temples, but steady as ever. The kid asked, "You Ryder Whitmore?" Ryder smiled. "Just Ryder. The Whitmore part belongs to someone better." He handed the boy a cup of coffee. "You ride?" The kid nodded. Trying to find my road. Ryder looked past him toward the horizon, the valley glowing under sunset. Then start here, he said. The road's still open. As the engines of the Bitterroot chapter echoed faintly in the distance, the old man smiled. The road that began with kindness had come full circle, one hand helping another. Just like the day he stopped for an old woman nobody saw. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe kindness can still change a life, then join the ride. Subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon. Because every mile tells a story, every heart finds its road, and sometimes angels wear leather instead of wings.